Hey, what's going on, people? This your boy SportsTalkQue, and today I'm here to give y'all my second installment of my college football playoff rankings. How I feel the rankings should be in order every week up until the final selection in early December. So let's get straight into it with the group of five. So this past weekend, there was a top 25 matchup here in New Orleans between the Tulane Green Wave and the UCF Golden Knights. UFC came out and they won a game on the road, which was really impressive. And they won the top 25 matchup against a team that was ranked higher than them on a road environment. And a large part of that was due to quarterback John Rice Plumlee. And in this game, he was just phenomenal. You know, whether he made plays with his arm, throwing touchdowns, or whether he just burned Tulane with his legs on these long touchdown runs or these athletic plays, which display his athletic ability. He did a little bit of it all, and he showed why he's one of the best quarterbacks or best playmakers in the group of five setting. So at this point, UFC they control their own destiny. They moved in the first place in the American Athletic Conference, and as of right now, I fully expect them to be ranked anywhere between the high and the mid teens. I don't foresee them cracking the top 10 or anything like that, but when the next ranking is released, they will be the highest rated group of five school. So moving on a little bit, the team they played against, the Tulane Green Wave, who were my previous highest rated group of five school, they didn't do themselves any favors by losing a big game at home against a somewhat similar opponent, you know, of equal skill level or equal talent level. But with that being said, they're not completely out of the picture just yet. So if they win the next two games, they can secure a spot in the conference title game, which would presumably be a rematch against UCF at a neutral site. And although they did lose, they didn't just get blown out. You know, it was a pretty competitive game throughout. They may have got down early, but they fought back and they only lost by 7 points. So I expect them to be ranked somewhere in the top 20 to top 25 when the new college football playoff poll comes out. So, like I said, they're not all the way out of it, but they have to win their next two games to kind of get in the conference title game to put themselves back in that conversation to get that group of five bid. So before I get into the top eight, I want to give a huge shout out to the Oregon Ducks. They lost a real heartbreaker this past weekend against the University of Washington. And while they may not be officially dead to make the 14 playoff, it'll be a real long shot for them to make it. But they're still lingering around and they still have a very lot to play for. They can still clinch a berth in the conference championship game, which is the Pac-12 championship game, and they can still make it to a major bowl like the Rose Bowl or the Fiesta Bowl or something like that. And they also have a really big game this weekend, which is a de facto elimination game against the University of Utah. Both of those schools are still trying to vie for a berth in the conference championship. So it'll be interesting to see how Bo Nix performs this upcoming week against a really good defense, or Marquise Bucky Irvin, who's been playing really well this season as well, who I think isn't getting enough recognition as one of the best running backs in the Pac-12 and in the country. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that game this weekend between Utah and Oregon and to see how they're going to fare out. So now that that's out the way, I want to get into the top eight. Coming in at the eighth seed for my liking, I have the Tennessee Volunteers. So, of course, with Georgia and LSU clinching the berth in the SEC championship game, there's virtually no way that Tennessee could get in the playoff because they won't be a conference champion. With that being said, they still look really impressive this past week, and they're almost a lot to still be in the New Year's Six. So the way the offense performed this past weekend, I'm looking forward to seeing what else they have in store for the rest of the season and who they could potentially be matched up with in the New Year's Six and in which game once everything is finalized and announced. But as of right now, I have Tennessee gridlock at the number 8 seed because all the schools above them still have a chance to win their conference title, which is a major factor in winning or getting into the 14 playoff. And like I said, without them not being able to win their conference, I don't see them moving any higher than 8 unless a lot of teams lose. But even them so, I don't see them cracking the top 4 at this point this season. At number 7, we have the Clemson Tigers. They're slowly creeping back up the rankings. Despite the optics, Clemson isn't completely dead in the college football playoff 14 playoff hunt. So after a real ugly loss against Notre Dame last week, they bounced back this past Saturday with a real convincing win over Louisville. Those guys, they look like they're ready and they're able to compete against anybody in the country, and the offense is firing on all cylinders, and the defense, they always legit. So that's one team you just can't write off. And with that win against Louisville this past Saturday, they clinched the berth in the ACC title game where they'll match up against North Carolina. So say, for instance, they run the table and a couple of teams above them lose, they could easily find their way back into the playoffs. So y'all be on the lookout for Clemson, and don't be surprised if somehow they find their way in the top 4 come mid-December. Right above them at number 6, I have the LSU Tigers. So the Tigers move up one spot from last week in my ranking, and they went on the road this past weekend against Arkansas. A lot of people thought they would have been primed for a letdown spot after the big win against Alabama, and for a moment it did look like they came out there and sleptwalked. But even though they didn't play their best as a team, they showed that championship pedigree, and they did what it took to win a game on the road in a hostile environment and to keep their slim playoff hopes alive. You know, they look to be the first 2-loss team in the history to make the college football playoff. And I will say this. Of all the teams left in contention, I think LSU matches up best with the University of Georgia, and we're going to see how that play out in the SEC championship game in a couple of weeks. And a large part of that is due to freshman sensation Harold Perkins. In the game against Arkansas this past week, dude had 6 tackles, 4 of those were sacks, and of those 4 sacks, 2 of them was forced fumbles, including one that sealed the game late in the fourth quarter. So I fully expect Harold Perkins to be a freshman All-American, and I'm looking forward to what he has in store for the next 2 to 3 years in the LSU uniform. But all that being said, I have the Fighting Tigers at number 6 in this week's poll, and they could potentially move up even further if they keep winning and somebody above them lose. At number 5, I have the USC Trojans. This is probably the first time in quite some time that the Trojans are relevant in the national title discussion this late in the season. And to be quite honest, they're probably the last best chance for any Pac-12 school to get a berth in the top 4. And that's thanks in no small part to quarterback Caleb Williams, who accounted for 5 touchdowns against Colorado this past Friday night. And I really think that he's starting to set himself apart as a favorite in the Heisman Trophy, candidacy. And right now, I think he's looking like the best candidate. He's throwing touchdowns, he's running for touchdowns, and he's doing a little bit of it all. And if the Trojans want to make the playoff, they're going to need more from Caleb Williams, because this past week against Colorado, running back Ty Jones, he hurt his ankle or hurt his leg or something like that, and he's going to miss the remainder of the season. And he was a big part of the offense, so I'm pretty sure that Lincoln Riley and the rest of the USC Trojans, they're going to lean more heavily on Caleb Williams now more than ever to secure a spot in the top four. Like I said, those guys have a winning pedigree, so I know they're real excited to be this relevant this late in the season. So I think this is a good spot for them. So let's get into this top four now. So just a little spoiler alert: none of the teams in last week's top four lost, so it's gonna remain the same. But I'm gonna still give y'all the observations and little quick tidbits that I observed from watching the games this past weekend. So of course, at number 4 we have the TCU Horned Frogs, and they escaped against Texas with a narrow victory. It was a hardly fought defensive battle, but those are the kind of games that you expect when you're a championship level program. And that's in no small part to Max Duggan, the quarterback, who I talked about last week. He continued to impress me this week, and he found one of his favorite wide receiver targets, Quentin Johnston, who also had a big game and played a huge part in TCU beating Texas this past weekend. And I will say that TCU, they're going to have to win out to secure a spot in the playoff because there's some big-time name schools in front of them, and people are going to look for any opportunity to jump those guys. So they're going to have to continue to win and have style points if they want to hold on to the 4 seed or even jump higher than that. At number 3, I had the University of Michigan. They beat up on Nebraska this past weekend, and they really dominated the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And because of that, that allowed running back Blake Corum to have a really, really good day. And I think he's easily one of the best running backs in the entire country. That being said, I feel like if Michigan wants to, keep their spot in the top 4 past the next 2 weeks, their offense is going to have to open up and kind of evolve a little bit more because this whole, 3 to 5 yards in a pile of dust, that works against schools like Indiana and Maryland and Northwestern and whatnot. But when you get to play these upper echelon schools like Clemson and like they did last year against Georgia or schools like LSU and whatnot, you're going to find out that those schools are just as dominant at the line of scrimmage and they have just as good athletes, if not better ones. So I think, if they want to continue to have success, Jim Harbaugh, he's going to have to open that playbook up a little bit more and kind of, open the passing game up a little bit more than it currently is. So, yeah. Coming in at number 2, I have Ohio State University. Now, this is no team that's no stranger to being explosive and high flying. And the main cog in that machine is quarterback C.J. Stroud, who's probably going to be a first-round NFL pick in next year's draft. And like this past week against the University of Indiana, he had 5 touchdown passes. He slung the ball all over the field, and he just looked overall impressive. Every time I see him, he really amazes me, and he does phenomenal things on the football field. So one of his favorite targets as of late has been wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr., who's been doing a lot of phenomenal things himself, catching passes all over the field. He's been taking handoffs on reverses out the backfield and taking them to the house and whatnot. So, Ohio State, those guys know how to put a show on and they know how to rack up style points. And that's why they're my number 2 team. And I'm looking forward to them and Michigan facing off next week. And before I move on, I also want to point out how impressive their defense has been as of late. Those guys have been playing really good, so I want to give them a quick shout out. So coming in at number 1, we have the University of Georgia. which should be no huge surprise. So throughout the past 2 or 3 years, everybody has been talking about how good Georgia's defense is, but this past week, I feel like their offense really showed out. And again, that's in no small part of quarterback Stetson Bennett, who looked really sharp this weekend. You know, he ran the ball when he had to, and when he didn't make plays with his legs, he was throwing touchdowns all over the field. And two of his favorite targets was his two tight ends. And I just want to say that I feel like the University of Georgia has the best tight end room in the entire country, and I don't think that's no huge surprise because those guys recruit elite talent all over the field on an annual basis. What I will say was a surprise though was wide receiver Larry McConkey. That dude, he came out of nowhere. Again, he ran a 70-yard touchdown run out the backfield off a reverse. He also caught a long touchdown pass from Stetson Bennett. So he's just another weapon that other teams have to account for when they match up against the Bulldogs this season. But, you know, outside of that, the defense, they did play good as usual. And I also want to say that, like I alluded to earlier, they went to a hostile environment and the offense, they really opened up. So that kind of caught me off guard a little bit. So that'll be something to look forward to in the upcoming weeks. Like I said, in about 2 or 3 weeks, them and LSU going to face off in the SEC championship game, and I think that's going to probably be their biggest test this season thus far. So those are my rankings for this week. If y'all like what y'all saw, y'all like, comment, subscribe, share the video. If y'all don't like it or disagree with some of what I said, y'all still do the same thing. Until next time, peace.